Hi, the video you're about to see is part of the pipe and verse segment of Perkins Pipes. It's just that it was recorded before I started this segment. So for this video, it doesn't have the usual introduction, but this is part of pipe and verse. Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Seemed only appropriate to have out a Danish tobacco here today to go along with the Georg Jensen Bent Dublin Danish tobacco for a Danish pipe. It seemed appropriate because we're going to revisit one of the most important works in Western English-speaking literature, and talk about something you might not have thought about before connected with all this. So, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. We've talked about Beowulf on this channel before. At least once that I know of. I'd actually have to go back and look at the videos to see. But let's just put it this way. You wouldn't have The Lord of the Rings if you didn't have Beowulf. Okay? So if nothing else, for all you Tolkien fans out there, you wouldn't have any of his stuff if it weren't for Beowulf. Tolkien was a Beowulf, he's a scholar, particularly he focused on Beowulf, and he published an essay, I want to say in the 1930s, about Beowulf that really brought Beowulf as a poem and work of literature back kind of into the modern awareness. Beowulf is Old English, and as I may have talked about before, one of the classic translations for many, many years into modern English was this one by Burton Raffel. This is the one I read in high school, I recall. In fact, this is the one from high school. And it starts off, "Hear me. We've heard of Danish heroes, ancient kings, and the glory they cut for themselves swinging mighty swords. How Shield made slaves of soldiers from every land, crowds of captives he'd beaten into terror. He traveled to Denmark alone, an abandoned child, but changed his own fate, lived to be rich and much honored." Now, like I said, that's been the classic translation for many, many years. In fact, the Raffel translation first came out in 1963, which apparently this is. This is a 1963 copy. Then there was this one, the one by Seamus Heaney. He lives in Dublin, or lived in Dublin. And let's see here. This was done in 2000. And as I mentioned before, what's neat about Heaney's translation is that it's bilingual. So you get both the Old English and his translation on facing pages. Now, this is how he starts out. "So, the spear Danes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them had courage and greatness. We've heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. They were shield chieftains, scourge of many tribes, a wrecker of mead benches, rampaging among foes. The terror of Hall troops had come far. A foundling to start with, he would flourish later on as his powers waxed and his worth was proved. Now, I gotta be honest, I've come to really enjoy the Seamus Heaney translation. And I've enjoyed Beowulf a lot, despite the fact that I have an ongoing, friendly little war with a dear, dear friend of mine who teaches English. And he's a big Beowulf fan, and my go-to guy is Alexander Pope. That's my favorite poet. And he loves to tease me about Alexander Pope stuff, and I tease him about Beowulf, and it's an absolute nerd fest sometimes. But I do like Beowulf. So much so, and I think I showed you this. I rewrote Beowulf in ballad stanza for my son when he was young. And let's see here. This was done in 2008. And so we got some nice illustrations in there, and we got my version. And again, this is an abbreviated version, so it doesn't even start off there with Shield Chieftain. It really starts right off with Beowulf, the character. Long, long ago, great Hrothgar ruled with Wagtho by his side. In Harrod Hall, a mighty place, the Danish people's pride. But each night when the sun had sunk and stars had claimed its place, a monster stole out of the dark to terrify that race. His name was Grendel, and he mauled each thane who tried to stand, and ripped their bodies, throwing round each head and heart and hand. So that was my version. Okay. I don't want to talk about that really today. What I want to talk about is something people don't often think of, and that is when students teach teachers. When students teach teachers. It would have been in the early 2000s, and maybe it was around 2000 when the Heaney came out, that I had my first occurrence of this. Now, I've always had many instances of students teaching me something, but when it came to Beowulf, I had this wonderful student named Isaac. Had his sister too. His sister was named Rachel. And Isaac comes in one day and he says, Mr. Perkins, have you heard about Seamus Heaney's new translation of Beowulf? No, he's a Latin student, but he was a literary-minded young man. I said that I had, and he said, actually, I don't remember if I had heard, or he may have introduced it to me, come to think of it. But at any rate, he then said that his dad had it, and he said, I'll bring it in when my dad has finished reading it. Now, I've always told that story to illustrate the point of reading around your children, reading in front of your children, and what a real benefit and blessing it was for that young man to have someone in the house who just picks up literature and reads it just as a matter of course, right? We sometimes will say, well, our children need to read more. Well, what are we doing, right? Are we reading in front of them, or are we just vegging out in front of television? Then, some 20 plus years after that, just recently, as a matter of fact, another student of mine, recently graduated, texted me about a video on Beowulf. Now again, this young man was a Latin student, did 4 years of Latin with me. Very, very well-read young man. Enjoyed reading on his own, and was the kind of guy who would talk to me after class or talk to me before class, and all this kind of stuff. And he says, I think you would enjoy this. So, turned out I needed to mow the grass. So I'm mowing the grass, got my headphones on. Very often I'm listening to music, sometimes a podcast, whatever. And I listened to this video. Now, this video is basically a podcast. You really didn't need to see the two guys that were in the video. But and we're going to link to that video here in this episode as well. And so while I'm mowing the grass, I listened to this whole discussion between these two guys and what they had to say about Beowulf. And it was good stuff. Check out the video if you're interested. Highly recommend it. Okay. Let's talk about the fact that some 20 years apart, two different students of mine had brought something in about Beowulf to share with me. It's not surprising that a Latin student might bring in something about Latin. Hey, there was a Latin question on Jeopardy last night, right? Jeopardy, the television show, often has Latin stuff. And students do that all the time. It's not surprising that a student would see some news article about something that had been unearthed recently and some archaeological find. Happens all the time. And indeed, students bring that kind of thing into me. And I love that. But how about this? I don't teach Beowulf. I don't teach English literature. So somehow these students thought that I would be interested in something outside of the field that I'm in and the class that they had had. And of course I was. And I got to say, I loved that. I absolutely loved that. And I'm just going to say today, this one doesn't have a question to it. This video doesn't have a question to it, but it's a suggestion. If you have children or grandchildren, nieces or nephews, younger people in your sphere of influence, encourage them to do that. Encourage them to bring things into their teachers. Teachers love this kind of stuff. Okay? Teachers, we're learners, okay? We're students. And we love to learn. That's part of why we're in the profession that we are in. So on the one hand, we just love it. The other thing is, teachers want to interact with people. That's why we teach, okay? We like to interact with people. And so when people bring us something, we're excited about that. But even more importantly, I would say, is that when a young person brings to an adult something that he or she thinks that adult might be interested in, it's great training. It's great equipping for that young person really to be that lifelong learner that we always talk about. We want people to be curious and constantly learning and growing. Well, believe me, it's not just about the right answers that they got on that unit test. It's not just about the answers that they got correct on a quiz. The real learning is the engagement with the things of life, the things of this world. And it's not just about them taking information in, but it's also about them sharing it with their parents, sharing it with their grandparents, right? So I encourage you, encourage those conversations with the young people in your life. Who knows? They might just teach you a thing or two. As Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.